You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. From our studios come special guests and netball commentary, exclusively on YouTube.
Since Ben and I recorded this program in the studio, it's come to our attention that we failed to mention the new challenge trophy that is being introduced next year by the ANZ Championship. We'll be discussing this new feature in further depth during our preview show for next season's ANZ Championship, which we will record in our studio in the new year. In the meantime, enjoy this program.
Good afternoon, listeners, and welcome to this special edition of the 3 Feet Radio Show. It's a special edition because we're going to discuss the new conference system that will be introduced for the ANZ Championship next year. G'day there to my co-host, Luke Herbert.
Hello, Ben, and welcome to the studio. And once again, your coffee machine has broken down, so soon the courier will be here to pick it up for it to be fixed under warranty.
What coffee machine are you talking about, Luke? Can't I just snap my fingers and make a cup of coffee appear?
No, but you'd have more chance of it than your machine actually working. But get us underway.
Well, there's been a bit of conjecture about this conference system because a lot of people believe, Luke, that it is purely to ensure that there are more New Zealand teams in the finals. What's your take on that?
Well, there's no arguing that point, but just before we discuss the reasoning behind the new draw or the new system for the ANZ Championship, Ben, just outline to the listener, in case they're not aware yet, how will it work?
Okay, and credit to the ANZ Championship for having a pretty detailed guide on their website. I'm practically going to quote verbatim from their website here. It says, from 2015, the traditional ladder will be replaced by standalone Australian and New Zealand conference ladders. Teams will be ranked during the season within individual conferences based on points accumulated. At the conclusion of the regular rounds, the top 3 teams from both the Australian and New Zealand conferences will progress through to the finals. And then what you'll have for the finals will be like, it'll be something like this. It'll be conference elimination finals. You'll have the second and third ranked Australian teams playing against each other. And then it'll be the same in the New Zealand conference elimination final, where the 2 Kiwi teams ranked second and third will play. And then you'll have the conference final. And then you'll have the conference final in Australia and New Zealand. You'll have the winner of each conference versus the winner of the elimination final in each country. Then you move on to the traditionally the ANZ Championship semi-finals. It'll be the winner of the conference final in Australia versus the winner of the New Zealand conference final in the first semi-final. In the second semi-final, you will have the winner of the New Zealand conference final versus the loser of the Australian conference final. And then the ANZ Championship grand final will be between the winner of semi-final number 1 and the winner of semi-final number 2.
Let's just come back to why this is being done for a moment. This has been done solely to get more money out of Sky TV, pay TV, because Sky, the New Zealand end of the broadcast deal pays for by far the majority of the revenue that is used to run the ANZ Championship. Now, there's only so much more money, even with this new system, they're going to be able to get out of Sky Sport because the New Zealand market is only so big for netball in a country, in the ANZ Championship, in a country that has a population of 4.5 million people. Shifting gears then, it's something I just wish to point out and clarify, because even though Ben did a very good job at explaining the new conference system, there's now going to be 6 teams out of the 10 teams in the competition making the finals. So, Ben, you and I were discussing this quite a bit off air, but how does the 6 teams out of the 10 making the finals make you feel?
It makes me feel a bit disappointed because if let's say you're the 6th ranked team, you've practically got Buckley's chance. Sorry to use an old Australian colloquialism there. You may have heard that in New Zealand too, Luke, of really pushing ahead in the finals. It's sort of a waste, you could say, to have 6, isn't it?
Well, we don't use that term in New Zealand, but I think it was a very good use of the term because there's other less polite terms that, because this is a family show, that we can't use. And
correct, Luke, correct.
If you were to take the equivalent of the conference system and the teams that will make the finals under the system they've used previously up until the season is gone, you could have a 6th ranked New Zealand side or 8th ranked side perhaps even, making the finals. just because while they have done alright in the New Zealand Conference, they are, a weaker side overall. And ultimately, the comparison that you and I drew was that the AFL, and for the benefit of our Kiwi listeners, because, Australian sports fans will know this, the AFL is an 18-team competition and it has a top 8. So, there's 10 teams in the AFL that just don't make the finals. And the AFL doesn't use a conference system either, despite the fact they've got 18 teams, even though it is worth pointing out in fairness that most of the teams are based in Melbourne. With that in mind, what are your thoughts on that comparison to the AFL, Ben? Because you've been...
That comparison's really interesting because sorry to cut you short there, Luke. I've actually researched this a little bit and I've shown you it as well off air, and you've found it interesting too. Quoting directly here from the Wikipedia page about the AFL Grand Final, I don't usually quote Wikipedia, but this is what I was able to find on there. It says, the second finals format was ultimately discarded by the VFL, which is the Victorian Football League, which was just before the competition became national, after the satisfactory conclusion to the 1900 VFL season, where Melbourne won the premiership after having finished 6th out of the 8 teams after the home and away season, ahead of Carlton and St Kilda, with a record of 6 wins, 8 losses. As of 2012, this is the lowest ladder position from which a team has won the premiership. So it's practically saying that a 6th team could win the premiership, but it's highly unlikely.
Yeah, it's like winning first division lotto, Billy. The chances of a team outside of the top 4, by the top 4 teams, I mean the top 4 teams that would be ranked under the old system. So you can perhaps consider them the 4 strongest sides going into the finals system. The chances of a team outside of those winning the ANZ Championship under the new conference system, it's slim. I mean, it is conceivable, perhaps, that, let's just say, for example, if the Southern Steel finish, say, 3rd or 2nd in the New Zealand Conference next season, say they were to pull off a series of upsets in the finals, yeah, you could see them perhaps making the grand final, which would be an historic achievement in itself. But to say then that the Steel would then win the grand final up against one of the best and one of the better sides in the competition, I think that is just too far-fetched. And ultimately, if you're a spectator and your team has made the finals and you are a supporter or fan of, say, one of either the best team in the competition that season or, say, the second best team, why should you fork out money to go watch your team beat, and perhaps beat comprehensively, a team that doesn't deserve to be in the finals?
That's right, Luke, because what you wouldn't want to see is you don't want to see one-sided finals matches. I don't like seeing it in any sport because it therefore sort of, is disappointing for not just administrators but also fans too. As you say, they pay their money. But just touching on something else too, percentages and stuff are going to play a big part in this, like they did this year, because it was a very open ANZ Championship season. Just quoting again from the official ANZ Championship website, where they're explaining the new format of the league with this conference system. It says, if the teams are even on points at the conclusion of the regular rounds, the teams will be ranked by goal percentages. If 2 teams are still equal after goal percentage, the results of matches between the 2 teams will decide the regular ranked team. If the teams are still equal, then they are measured by goal difference across all games. Goals for minus, goals against. If still equal, the higher ranked team will be the one with the most goals scored for overall games in the regular rounds.
Yes, and percentage as a way of ranking teams is also something taken from Australian sports, I believe. I believe the AFL also uses a sort of percentage system as well that becomes quite important as you get towards finals time. And while the Kiwi listener may be saying, I don't care about AFL, that's okay. Obviously rugby's the unofficial religion in New Zealand. Look, these comparisons are useful. And, if you do want to just take a look at the AFL website, you don't have to, know about the teams. You don't even have to care about last year's results or anything. Just go to the AFL website, have a look at the ladder, have a look at the percentages, and, get an idea of why Ben and I are using the AFL as a useful comparison. Basically, when I've read social media and the posts on the Netball Scoop forum, and I should point out here, just on balance, that neither is a scientific survey of the levels of support for the conference system, although they are indicators, there has been virtually no support from fans for this system, and basically everyone has said it's just for pay TV and to try and get more New Zealand teams in the final. And perhaps the most damning indictment is when you have Kiwi netball fans that are diehard supporters of the Silver Ferns and their ANZ Championship sides. It's people like myself and others. When they're saying the same thing and they're not even trying to dress up the pig, that's a pretty sure indicator of how things are, Ben. Do you think that's correct?
I think it is correct, Luke, and I think too when it comes to issues like this, New Zealand netball fans seem to be more, how do I say it, probably more outspoken on these issues. Yes, Aussies are too, but I think it's just part of the culture of New Zealand sport, and because there are a lot less sports to cover in New Zealand, that's why the New Zealanders are more passionate about netball than what we are here. Although it is getting better, as we have discussed previously on this show.
Yeah, and as you say, there's the coverage and is getting better and more fans are being attracted to the ANZ Championship in Australia. Do you think this new conference system will deter people from either becoming new fans or put off people that are just starting to take an interest in the competition?
I think all it'll do is just confuse people, really, to tell you the truth.
Do you think it'll just confuse them for the first season it's in place, or do you think it's just going to, rather than confusion after the first season, do you think it's just going to leave people, pissed off?
As I said, frustrated, they could be pissed off. I think it might take a little while to get used to, but I think eventually people may warm to it, people may not. I think it's just a wait and see approach that's been adopted here by the league's administrators.
I think if I had to say one thing that will certainly happen, and I think it's going to at least happen for the first few seasons, say the first 3 seasons this format is used, when the top 6 finalists are found, you're going to have screaming protests, people crying foul from the teams in Australia in particular, or really only Australia that didn't make the finals under the conference system, because with the 1.5 round draw and the fact that the Australian teams overall tend to be stronger than their Kiwi counterparts, there is bound to be 1 or 2 Australian teams that are better than their Kiwi counterparts that have made the finals. Now, what's going to be interesting to see is if people just get used to this and live with it, or people are going to get angry about it at the end of every season. And, normally I say people should just vent their frustrations at something, have their say, and then move on and enjoy the sport. But honestly, Ben, in this case, I believe that, for as long as there is a good Australian side, or 2 Australian sides, or however many missing out on a finals place under this conference system, that people will have legitimate beef. And they should cry foul at the end of every season, because this has been delivered by the ANZ Championship against the wishes of those same people.
Just an example of it going against the wishes of people. This guy, you probably could call him a fan, but he's also a journalist. He divides opinion on both sides of the ditch, including he actually attacked our Diamonds captain, Laura Geitz, a year or so ago and essentially called her a cheat. And that's Hamish Bidwell. If you get a chance, listeners, get onto the Stuff website and have a read of his article. It says farcical changes to value Netball League. I'll just read the couple of opening paragraphs to you written by Hamish. This is his response to the introduction of the conference system. He says, not being a surprise hasn't made the restructure of the Trans-Tasman Netball League any more palatable. I'll say, frankly, the changes are a disgrace and confirming the view of the skeptics that netball is a Mickey Mouse sport where everyone's a winner. The competition's governing body, TTNL, widely forecast these moves months ago, which would see 3 New Zealand teams qualify for playoff netball every year by way of having their own conference. Never mind if New Zealand's top 3 teams are actually only the 6th, 7th and 8th best teams across the competition. They'll still go to the finals series. In 7 seasons of this competition, the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic in 2012 were the only side to claim the title. Others, such as the Central Pulse, have never even made the semi-finals. That were a feature of the way the competition was previously structured. So that's just an example, I think, Luke, of the displeasure that Kiwis are expressing towards the introduction of the conference system.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I happen to think in a lot of his writings, Hamish is, how should I say this, oceans off the mark, perhaps would be...
Provocative, you could say.
You could say that. I don't have any problems with journalists writing provocative pieces. I think that's ultimately good. It's good to provoke discussions, but I think that often, in terms of, say, his commentaries on Loyal Guides. And I even, I say this as a Kiwi netball fan, he's just been so far off the mark that, in my view at least, I'm not really quite sure what I can really say other than that and stay sort of within the bounds of, polite language. But the fact that Hamish has, in the past been so far off the mark and yet is so correct in this case, I think is another indicator of, I don't want to use the term bad, but just how much this system is, well, I guess you can say it really is bad for everyone, but the revenue that's brought into the sport. Which, okay, someone's going to pipe up and say, but Luke, the ANZ Championship needs money to run. Obviously that is true, but I think there needs to be enough respect for the fans that if the overwhelming majority of people are saying they don't want a concept, there's usually good reasons for it. In your view, Ben, don't you think it's a little unusual that there's almost universal condemnation from fans of this concept? Okay, there's going to be the odd person saying they support it, but usually there's a lot more debate amongst netball fans when there's proposed changes to the ANZ Championship or some other changes within the sport.
There has been, Luke, but I think it's reflective of the sort of the momentum shift we have at this time of the year. Yeah, there's obviously going to be the odd article about the ANZ Championship fixture being released, player movement, but I think sometimes the ANZ Championship, they might have caught themselves off guard a bit here by releasing these changes so late in terms of it being able to gain relevant media traction. Had they announced it probably maybe just straight after the grand final, while netball's still fresh in the minds of a lot of people, club netball anyway. I mean, we had the tests, but I mean, club netball anyway. There probably would have been more discussion and debate about it.
Well, you could get quite cynical with the way the ANZ Championship has announced this. I mean, I'm not suggesting this was the case, but if you were to put on a very cynical hat, you might say they've done what politicians do and they've released the news in what they hope is a quiet news period when no one's paying attention or they're paying attention to other things. But that is putting on a very cynical hat, mind you.
It is cynical, but I just wanted to preface all my comments in this program too. To TTNL, Netball Australia and Netball New Zealand. I have worked previously for Netball Australia. That's on the public record. Some listeners may know that, some may not know that. I'm not trying to bag a former employer or anything like that. This is just purely me being subjective and trying to look at it from an outsider's perspective because I don't work for Netball Australia anymore, and I'm just passionate about the game and I just like to talk about the game.
Absolutely, Ben. And, what we've discussed on this program, I don't think we've really said anything that isn't really being discussed in other channels, whether it be social media or the Netball Scoop Forum or so on. And, we do get a lot of support from those organisations for the show. So, we're hardly going to take a cricket bat to them for no reason at all. I mean, we'd be cutting our own throats, so to speak. But sometimes, something can come along, like this, and it is sometimes everyone just reaches the same conclusion because it is what it is, Ben. So, I don't think you have said anything unreasonable in this program. I think you've been quite as fair as you can be. Before we wrap up, though, this program, have we missed out on mentioning anything to do with the conference system? Have we missed out on anything that we should have said or an upside that we have omitted?
I don't believe we have, Luke. If any of the listeners need further information about the league format for next year, just go to the ANZ Championship website, anz-championship.com, and there's a link you can click on the front page there. That's what I've been referring to as we've been chatting today, Luke. Well, listeners, thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully we've made sense of the 2015 ANZ Championship conference system for you. And thanks for joining me today, Luke.
And thank you for having me in the studio.
You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. Tune in next time for more special guests and netball commentary exclusively on YouTube.